Your net worth is at a record high. So is the number of hours you spend awake at 2 a.m. doing math that doesn't work. True, same year. Somewhere tonight a woman is looking at a retirement app that says she's worth more than she's ever been, and then looking at her checking account, which says she can't cover daycare this month. My name is Horizon, and I spend an unreasonable amount of time reading Federal Reserve reports that explain why doing everything right can still feel like losing. If you've ever felt richer on a screen and poorer in your actual life, hit subscribe, because today we're explaining the gap, not closing it, because you can't close a gap you don't understand. 3 people, same paradox, 3 different flavors of it. Marcus, 41, software engineer outside Austin. Denise, 33, elementary school teacher in Columbus. Derek, 52, owns a small landscaping company outside Phoenix. 3 are, on paper, doing better than they were 5 years ago. All 3 would tell you, if you caught them honestly, that it doesn't feel that way. Of them is about to discover the gap is actually working in his favor. The other 2 are about to discover it isn't, and the reason has nothing to do with effort. Let's start with the number that started this video. U.S. household net worth just hit a record $184.1 trillion, according to the Federal Reserve's latest accounting. Gain of $2.2 trillion in a single quarter, driven mostly by corporate equities climbing, even as real estate values softened a little. That is the collective scoreboard. Individually, the median American household is sitting on net worth in the low $200,000s once you adjust the last official Fed survey for the inflation that's happened since. Of those numbers are real. Both are also, individually, almost useless to you, because net worth is an X-ray of your assets and liabilities on one specific day. It says nothing about whether you can pay rent on the 15th. Here's the number sitting right next to it that the first number never gets photographed with. Roughly half of Americans currently describe themselves as living paycheck to paycheck. Into the version of that question, the Fed has asked every year since 2013 whether you could cover a surprise $400 expense with cash on hand, and about a third of the country still can't. That's the whole video sitting in 2 statistics published by the same institutions in the same season. The country got richer and stayed stretched, not sequentially, simultaneously. Marcus, Denise, and Derek are not confused about their spreadsheets. They can each tell you their number. What they can't explain is why the number keeps climbing while the feeling of security keeps shrinking. So let's actually explain it, because the explanation is not "you're bad with money." It's structural, it's measurable, and once you see the mechanism, you'll never read a net worth headline the same way again. First thing to understand is that net worth is a portfolio number, and your life is a cash flow problem. Those are 2 different math problems being solved with 2 different sets of numbers, and the media reports on one while your body experiences the other. Marcus's net worth is about $340,000. Most of it is not liquid. Roughly $180,000 sits in home equity he cannot spend without selling the house or taking on new debt against it. Another $110,000 sits in a 401k he is legally penalized for touching before 59 and a half. The rest is a car worth less every day, and about $12,000 in an actual checking and savings combination he can spend right now this week on anything at all. So when people say Marcus is worth $340,000, what they mean precisely is that Marcus has access to about $12,000, and a claim on $328,000 he can't touch without cost, penalty, or a multi-month process involving a real estate agent. That's not wealth in the sense that matters at 2 a.m., that's wealth in the sense that matters at 65. This is the first mechanism, and it's the simplest one. Net worth counts illiquid assets, and daily life runs on liquid cash. The stock market and the housing market have both climbed hard over the last several years. That climb shows up instantly in net worth statistics because a spreadsheet updates the moment a valuation changes. It does not show up in your bank account until you sell, and selling your house or liquidating your retirement account to buy groceries is not a plan, it's a crisis. So the paper number moves every single day, celebrated in headlines. The cash number moves once every 2 weeks on payday, and it's the only number your landlord has ever asked about. Here's where it gets uncomfortable, because the illiquid share of the average household's net worth has been growing, not shrinking. Estate and retirement accounts together make up the large majority of middle-class net worth in this country, which means as your net worth grows, the growing part is disproportionately the part you can't spend. You are, in a very literal sense, getting richer in the part of your life you can't access and staying flat in the part you live in every day. Nobody explains that when they run the headline. They just run the top-line number, and the top-line number is true and almost completely disconnected from your Tuesday. Denise's version of this is sharper because she doesn't own a home yet. Her net worth is smaller in absolute terms, maybe $60,000, almost all of it retirement contributions and a modest emergency fund. But she rents in a market where a two-bedroom now averages somewhere around $1,800 a month nationally, higher in her actual city, and her rent has climbed faster than her teaching salary for 3 straight years running. Denise's net worth chart is technically going up and to the right. Denise's actual monthly experience is a rent notice that arrives a little heavier every August. True things, same woman, same year. Which brings us to mechanism number 2, and this is the one almost nobody puts in a headline because it requires admitting the average is lying to you. Overall inflation numbers get reported as a single tame figure hovering around 3 to 4% a year. That number is a blended average across everything Americans buy, from televisions, which have gotten cheaper for decades, to childcare, housing, and healthcare, which have not. The problem is that the things getting cheaper are things you buy occasionally, and the things getting more expensive are the things you buy every single month, non-negotiably, whether you feel like it or not. At what's actually inside that blended number? Housing costs, whether rent or the totality of owning, have been rising faster than the headline inflation rate for years running. Insurance, especially auto and home insurance, has been climbing at rates that make the general inflation number look quaint. Childcare has outpaced wage growth for over a decade. Medical costs, same story decade after decade. Meanwhile, a laptop or a television genuinely is cheaper in real terms than it was 10 years ago, and that gets averaged into the same blended CPI figure, quietly dragging the headline number down. This is why the government can report inflation cooling toward its target, and a family can still feel like they're falling behind. They are both correct because they are measuring different baskets. The government's basket is weighted toward everything you buy. Your household's actual lived basket is dominated by 4 or 5 line items: housing, insurance, childcare, healthcare, groceries, that have been rising faster than the average for years. Derek doesn't buy a new laptop every month. He pays rent on his equipment yard, his commercial insurance, and his crew's healthcare contributions every single month, and every one of those has been the fast-rising kind of expense. Nominal wages actually did grow over the past year, somewhere in the neighborhood of 3.5 to 3.6%. Inflation over that same window ran close behind it, sometimes a hair ahead, sometimes a hair behind, which sounds like a wash, roughly break-even. That comparison uses the blended basket. Compare wage growth instead to the specific basket a middle-income household actually can't avoid, and those categories have been running well ahead of both wages and headline inflation for the better part of a decade. Income gains keep getting absorbed by a small number of unavoidable line items before a household ever gets to feel the raise. The paycheck grew. The part of the paycheck that was actually free to spend or save did not grow nearly as much, and in a lot of households it shrank. There's a term for this in the research, the denominator effect, and once you understand it, you'll never look at a percentage the same way. When your net worth grows through investment gains, unrealized and mostly untouchable, and your unavoidable monthly costs grow through real cash leaving your account, you're comparing a numerator that's abstract to a denominator that's brutally concrete. Marcus's 401k could be up 12% this year. His health insurance premium is also up. His property taxes are up because his home value that's inflating his net worth is the exact same value the county uses to tax him. The 12% gain is a number on a screen he'll see in 30 years if the market cooperates. The daycare renewal hit his checking account 9 days ago. Let's talk about Derek specifically, because Derek is the one who's about to discover the gap is working in his favor. The reason is the one variable that actually explains most of the difference between the three of them: what kind of debt you're carrying and at what rate. Derek bought his house and financed his work truck fleet back when rates were near historic lows. His mortgage payment has not moved in 5 years. Meanwhile, his landscaping business's revenue, which is priced in whatever the market will bear this season, has moved up with inflation because he raises his quotes every spring the way everyone else raises their prices. So Derek's income is inflating along with the general price level, roughly, while his single largest fixed cost, the mortgage, is frozen at a rate that increasingly looks like a gift the older it gets. Every year that passes, that fixed payment becomes a smaller and smaller share of a rising income. This is, quietly, one of the only mechanisms in this entire economy that reliably works in the ordinary person's favor over time, and it only works if you locked in the debt before the world repriced. Marcus and Denise don't have that lever pulled yet, or at all. Marcus's mortgage is newer, financed at a materially higher rate than Derek's, so his fixed housing cost is a larger share of his income. Denise doesn't have a mortgage at all. She has a lease that resets every 12 months to whatever the current market will bear, which means she gets zero benefit from the fixed payment mechanism and full exposure to rising rents every single renewal. Same country, same inflation, 3 completely different exposures, because the exposure isn't about how hard anyone works. It's about which side of an interest rate reset you happen to be standing on when you signed. This is mechanism 3. The asset-owning, fixed-rate debt side of the economy and the renting, variable cost side of the economy are having 2 different decades. If your biggest monthly obligation is locked at a rate from a few years ago and your income moves with inflation, the gap between what you earn and what you owe widens every year, automatically, without you doing anything clever. If your biggest monthly obligation resets constantly, whether it's rent, a variable rate loan, or a service contract, that gap does the opposite. It's not that Derek is smarter than Denise. It's that Derek's biggest number is frozen and Denise's biggest number gets renegotiated by someone else, once a year, in her landlord's favor, every single time. Let's talk about the part that actually stings the most, because it's the one variable people can genuinely influence and the one that gets weaponized against them constantly. Lifestyle creep riding shotgun on top of every one of these gains. This is where I need to be careful, because the honest research on this cuts against the easy, condescending version of the story. It is not simply that people can't resist a fancier coffee. It's that a very specific psychological pattern kicks in every time income rises, and almost nobody is warned about it in advance. Income goes up, whether through a raise, a bonus, or a strong market year that makes someone feel flush. Spending rises to absorb a meaningful chunk of that gain within a matter of weeks. Because of one big purchase, but through a dozen small, individually reasonable feeling adjustments. A slightly nicer grocery order. A subscription that made sense in the moment. A dinner out that used to be a special occasion and quietly becomes a Tuesday. None of these decisions look reckless in isolation. That's exactly what makes the pattern so effective at eating gains that should have gone toward the gap we've been describing. Researchers looking into why paycheck-to-paycheck living persists even among 6-figure earners keep landing on the same finding. It's not that high earners can't afford a buffer. It's that the buffer never gets built because the expenses scale up in step with the income, invisibly, one reasonable decision at a time. Denise got a raise this year, her first real one in 3 years of teaching. Within 2 months, without a single big purchase she could point to, her monthly discretionary spending had absorbed almost the entire increase. She didn't buy a car. She didn't take an expensive trip. She just slowly upgraded a dozen small line items until the extra income had nowhere left to land. This is the mechanism that makes net worth headlines feel like a cruel joke to the people living inside them. Because even when income does outpace the unavoidable basket for a stretch,